Hello and welcome to this download from Blackwell Online. My name is George Miller, and my guest today is Amanda Vickery, who is Professor of Modern British History at Royal Holloway. Amanda is a former winner of the Wolfson Prize for History, awarded for her 1998 book, The Gentleman's Daughter, Women's Lives in Georgian England. Her new, beautifully illustrated and richly detailed book, Behind Closed Doors, tackles a related theme: what home meant for Georgian men and women, both physically and psychologically. Amanda shows that it was a period when many ideas we are familiar with today, the desire for privacy, the feminisation of interiors, the commercialisation of home furnishings, the emergence of the notion of taste, were becoming prominent. Early in the book, Amanda says, interiors do not easily offer up their secrets. I asked her to tell me why that is, and how she went about getting at those secrets.
I think when I embarked on a project which was about the history of home and about interiors, physical and psychological interiors, I thought it'd be quite a straightforward project, that I would go into archives and that people would describe their interiors and their problems, their difficulties and their feelings, and that, I would be able to knit that, quilt that very beautifully into a book. But the more record offices I went to, the more clear it became that people don't tend to write about their homes. Just as today, when people sit down to write something, you tend to write about events. You don't write about the things that you take for granted. And that is absolutely the case for past records. So the problem is that the history of home hides in plain sight. It's so fundamental as to go without saying. An example of this is, I was always very interested in capturing how men felt about home. And so I did a big survey of the archives and wrote to all the archives in England and Wales asking, what diaries do you have which comment on domestic life? And I got one letter back from Cardiff saying, we've got a great diary in which a man, debates and discusses, his ideas about domestic life. So I went all the way to Cardiff and discovered that this diary of this Methodist preacher, all he says about home are the words at home. Monday, at home. Tuesday, at home. Wednesday, at home. So therefore, it occurred to me, well, I'm just going to have to change tack. And I thought I'd have to be more versatile and adaptable and think, well, what are the things which are likely to make men particularly, say, reflect on what home has been to them? And I thought, well, it would have to be some sort of catastrophe. And so then I started looking, for instance, at widowers' diaries, and suddenly it all comes pouring out. Widowers talk, are prolix about the difficulties of life at home. In a way, that casts a sidelight on the silent satisfactions of married life for men. Other examples of approaches I had to take, I thought, well, when would men and women talk about what they believed home to be as couples? They'd have to be separated in some way, otherwise you wouldn't find the material. And so I looked at courtship correspondence at the moment when it's kind of coming to a final head, the making of the marriage. And then it became clear that setting up home is absolutely central to, an idea of setting up home, what that home's to be, is central to the solidification of a courtship and the making of a marriage. And that's when men lay out, this is the kind of house I can offer you. And then the women come back and say, well, I don't like it like that. I think the kitchen should be like this. So they, therefore, in their letters, they detail what their expectations are of married life. But also, it became clear to me that it's part of the solidification of the match. And in working out their ideas about what the home is to be, women are testing the generosity of their men, and the men are assessing the domesticity of their women.
And the home then becomes a kind of expression of that match, doesn't it? I think you say this, it's sort of expressed and it's celebrated and it's made concrete. And I suppose that's something we may sort of take for granted now, but was that something which was coming into being in this period?
I think successful marriages solidify themselves, celebrate themselves, and express themselves in their homes and in the decoration of their homes. I think one of the reasons why I wanted to stress that is a lot of the literature on consumerism has argued about, do people consume to keep up with the Joneses? Is it all about status? Is it all about occupational identity? Is it about where you live regionally? Is it about your attitude to novelty? But this aspect about matrimony seemed to have been kind of thoroughly missed. But at the same time, as well as the household and the decoration of the interior, as well as it expressing successful matrimony, it can also express the reverse. After all, separation and divorce are the literal separation of the spoils and the divvying up of the marriage.
Now, for most people, their idea of the Georgian interior will have been shaped by visiting National Trust properties. And I think you issue a caveat in the book that may be a misleading impression that they gain from going around generously proportioned and nicely presented National Trust properties. Why is that?
I think when you go around a National Trust property, for one thing, you go often in an odd circulation around the house. So you go around the house perhaps from the back servants' entry or something, not in the way you're supposed to march through the house when it was set up. So often it's hard to kind of understand what it is the house was trying to say at the time in terms of status to you, the visitor, but also areas are kind of roped off. It's a museum. It feels very much like a museum, and there's no sense that you can kind of sit down at any of the tables. By the same token, they're absolutely empty of life and neat and tidy, and they don't smell, and there's no noise of a household. All of those things are absolutely kind of central to what it was like to live in even quite grand 18th century houses. Women's letters are full of complaints about how awful it is, how freezing, this kind of stiff back ceremony, the noise, people coming in, a lack of privacy. And so I'd argue that one of the reasons why you get this proliferation of little rooms in the 18th century, which women particularly like, dressing rooms and closets, is a response to the endless publicity and the racket of life at home and the sheer lack of privacy. There's great obsession in the 18th century with locking, keys, boxes, secret drawers, private desks. For the rich, there is an assumption that there will always be people trafficking through their rooms, and locksmiths advise employers. They say, well, if it's your own fault if you leave any of your possessions kind of lying about and unlocked. You have put temptation before your servants, so you principally are to blame. The onus is on you to hide these precious things away from the gaze of the susceptible servants.